Welcome to the CURES Cure Show, where we explore the cutting edge of wellness. I'm Kara Sundlin, and it is time now to get a little check on reality because we are looking at toxic achievement culture. This idea to keep achieving more, and some of it's well-intentioned by parents who just want to secure a good future for their kids. But are we doing it the wrong way? Dr. Laura Saunders, a child psychologist with the Institute of Living, is here to talk about what toxic achievement culture is. Thanks for being here, Doctor.
Thank you for having me, Kara.
So I know for years we've talked about things like poverty, not having enough food on the table, all these things that, oh, this poor child didn't have enough, and that can have a negative impact on children. But now it's the other way, where maybe pushing kids to do too much is also having a huge negative effect.
You're bringing up a good point, right? There's actually a decades long research looking at what we call adverse childhood events, ACE, adverse childhood events, and how those adverse childhood events, like you mentioned, poverty, trauma, domestic violence, all sorts of things, how it impacts social, emotional, intellectual development. There's a lot of research on that. We know it has a lot of negative effects and that it's cumulative. What these two national reports are now looking at from the National Academy of Science and from the Robert Wood Johnson Foundation is that students at the other end of the spectrum, so students that you might consider to be more socioeconomically advantaged or more intellectually capable, those students that are attending really competitive public and private schools, where the school systems have high test scores and lots of extracurricular activities, that those students are actually experiencing much higher rates of mental health problems compared to national norms. So almost at a rate of like 2 times, those students are more likely to suffer from clinical levels of anxiety and depression than their peers, and more likely to engage in substance use, because we know that substance use in adolescence is really used to manage emotional difficulties.
Okay, so let's start with that. Why do we think that these kids who seemingly have everything, and parents who are getting them tutors, and they're great on their travel sports team, and they're breaking down? Why is that?
So a generation ago, or a couple generations ago, achievement was important, but it wasn't so highly emphasized. And even amongst some of the super high achievers, right, there is a tremendous amount of pressure to do more. And what we want to look at, and honestly, I see a lot of these young people that come from, economically advantaged communities and school systems and homes, really struggling with a lot of pressure, always feeling like they need to do more. And it's concerning. And so, they have to have so many extracurricular activities, or more and more extracurricular activities, because they need to always beef up their college resume. And really, it's what we know is that it's just not good for their overall well-being and mental health.
Right. And part of it is where we are at right now, where this book that's come out called Never Enough, that spent years researching it and talking about some of the studies that you just mentioned, that parents are actually concerned, right? We always just want our kids to do better than we had it. And yet it's for the first time, if you went to a competitive university, I went to University of Michigan, that when we went, it was maybe a 20-25% acceptance rate. Now it's 5%. And so this idea of parents thinking I have to push, or my kid's not going to have all the things that I want them to have, things have just changed, right? We've just become increasingly competitive in the world.
Yes, increasingly competitive in the world. I think actually in some ways for this subgroup of individuals, young people that we're talking about, COVID made it worse, because what it did for a lot of those very competitive schools, that it increased the pool of people applying. So therefore the acceptance rates went down. Right, what would be a 10 or 15 or 20% acceptance rate now became a 5%, which is what the Ivy Leagues are. And I think we've said here before, it's not about finding the best college, it's about finding the college with the best fit. So it's really looking at what's going to be the best environment. And I just worry that these young people and parents, honestly, I think these parents are well-meaning. I'm not really even criticizing these parents, but at some point we have to dial it back and say, it's enough, you're good enough. And that's really the underlying message that these parents need to send to these kids. Listen, I have one of these kids, right? These super high achievers that think they have to do more and more and more. But the message that we want to send to them is, you are good enough just as you are. We accept you, we love you, we care about you. Taking another AP class, going on to do this and that achievement is not going to make you a better person, because you're already a good person.
Yeah, and so that's the antidote, I guess, that some of these studies found was mattering. If we feel like we matter and we're good at our core, it will mitigate some of these never enough feelings.
Yeah, I mean, what we need is buffers for the stress. And one of the buffers that this research looked at is this sense of mattering. I matter. I matter to the people around me. I matter whether I get, whether I took 6 AP classes or 10 AP classes, whether I got, 2s on the AP test or I got 4 or 5s on the AP test. I matter. I'm important. I'm good enough. We talk about the good enough parent, but, for a lot of these super high achieving teens, they need to know that they're also good enough. So the more we can send that message that you're okay, we love you, it's enough, the more we can help them dial back a little bit.
So part of it is just feeling like we don't have to keep up with the rat race, which I think is a delicate balance for parents, because we all, I mean, I know I push my kids sometimes. I hope I'm not pushing them too much, but, checking in, we all have these Power School updates all the time. How come this isn't done? Or come on, we got to really buckle down. What's the right balance so that we can help our kids achieve, do the things that they don't necessarily want to do, but also have good mental health?
So we all know our children, and we know which ones need a little push to kind of move forward. And we know which ones just do it fine on their own. In fact, sometimes we need to dial them back a little bit. So it's knowing your children. I'm not saying we have no expectations for our young people. They need expectations. We know which kids are more internally or intrinsically motivated. They just want to do their best because it makes them feel good about themselves. And we know which kids need that carrot at the end of the stick to help them keep moving forward. So it is about having expectations. It is about encouraging achievement. But for those kids that are prone to just do more, and put more and more stress and pressure on themselves, those are the ones I really worry about. All adolescents need to feel loved and cared about. So I'm not saying, that we don't need to express that love and care and devotion to our young people, but knowing which of our children we need to encourage a little bit and which ones we need to pull back a little bit.
Well, and there's the Ivy Leagues, and then there's these other top institutions, and there is a belief, especially in the upper class neighborhoods, that we need our kids to go to these top schools, or they need them to do these really well, on their SATs and all this. There's so much talk about that, because it's almost like, if they don't, they might not be okay later. So part of the conversation just needs to be different, I guess, with the adults in the world, and this idea that actually they'll be fine if they didn't go to one of these top places.
Yes, they will be fine, right? And what life experience teaches us is that sometimes it's not what you know, but it's who you know. And you can make connections anywhere you go if that's how you're so inclined. Look, we're facing record rates of loneliness and anxiety and stress. We don't need to be piling on this sense of ultra competition to go into some of those elite schools. We really do need our kids, our teens, to go to a college where it is the best fit, where they're going to learn and thrive. And I'm always a proponent of, it's not always the academics of what you learn, it's what you learn about your social emotional skills, it's what you learn about yourself. And I think that's really what happens more in college, is you learn about yourself, you develop a little more resiliency than when you're if under your parents' roof. Even if you're living at home and commuting to school, you're independent. No one knows if you're driving to your college class, if you're actually going to class, or if you're just skipping class, right? There's a lot more responsibility on your own shoulders to make this experience worthwhile. And so that's where you dig down, you develop that sense of self. What's important to me? What are my goals, right? The goal of adolescence in those young adult years are, who am I? What's important to me? It's identity formation. So it's to pull back on going to those super elite colleges, because they will take some people, but it's not always a good fit for a lot of our young people.
Well, and then there are the kids who maybe aren't overachieving, right? They're not getting straight A's, but they feel like they're not good enough because everyone around them is pushing. And that might even be the bigger bulk of the kids who are like, oh gosh, I'm not doing that great, and so is brilliant because they have straight A's and they're on a travel team and they're this and they're that. And then they feel not enough because of that. What do we do if maybe our kids aren't trying to kill themselves, but they're still feeling like, gosh, I don't measure up. Look what everyone's doing.
So I really want people to be measured against their own self and own potential, right? We talk about how social comparison really sucks the joy out of most things. So the more we can, push and encourage our kids to be their own best self, I don't necessarily think it's helpful to sometimes compare siblings when you have one super high achieving sibling and one sibling that's doesn't really care so much about school, knows that they have to get decent grades. I want individuals to put forth their best effort, to try hard, to follow through with things, to learn the skills that are necessary to be successful. And you don't need to be a rocket scientist. We don't need a room full of rocket scientists. We need people that are willing to kind of push themselves and try harder and put forth the effort to be their best selves. And really encourage them in that way. We don't need a room full of rocket scientists.
Right. Well, even if you're not a rocket scientist, but whatever you're studying, you're just trying to always get straight A's. If you're just trying to do it just to feel valued, which is what's happening, you say, in some of these really high achieving kids that are really in this culture, maybe in the upper class suburbs of go, you've got to do 2 sports and you've got to try harder and you've got to be a winner and you've got to be the top of your class. What happens is if it's all external, then ultimately they turn inward and they feel lonely and they might use substances to escape.
Yes, and that's where it's pulling away from that kind of toxic achievement culture and really looking at our young people and saying, you're good enough, right? I love you. I admire you. I'm proud of you. You're good enough. And again, what's interesting about this concept and some of the research that's come out is that it also means that the parents have to feel good about themselves, right? The parents have to believe that they are doing the best that they can, that they're trying hard. I mean, parents have a tremendous amount of pressure on them. It is the hardest job in the world, but the pressure is to be successful in their own work and to structure the kids as much as possible and get them to all their activities and make sure they're doing all of their assignments and checking Power School and checking all these things. There's a lot of pressure on parents as well. But the core of being a good parent is actually doing some things to take care of yourself, to be a good parent. And then you can actually model for your kids, I'm good enough. I'm doing the best that I can. And I love you and you're good enough too. Mm-hmm. So it's sort of like a flip side to typical child development, whereas, we need to boost our kids as much as possible. The reality in a lot of these situations is I need to feel good about myself in order to be the best parent that I can be.
Right. And that's definitely what the research found. yeah, I saw some of the interviews that the author did where she said she was interviewing parents all over the country, and they really had this real fear of like, my kids are not probably going to go to a college even as good as what I did, because it's changed so much. And, yes, we all wanted to achieve and do well, but it's just gotten to another level. But so as those parents who are thinking, gosh, I really want to make sure my kids are okay, maybe our motives are in the right spot, how do we start modeling in concrete ways, I'm enough, you're enough?
And I think, actually, I think it is doing things, right? Doing things around self-care, eating okay, getting out and getting a little exercise, spending time outside, socializing, connecting with people. So it's I'm taking care of myself. I have the emotional energy to now be a good parent and take care of you. I also have the emotional energy to be good at whatever job or career I'm working at, and maybe to save some time and energy from my spouse or some friends. So it's as much what you're doing as what you're saying, because it's not just I love you and I want to do whatever I can to support you. It's I love you but I also care about myself, and I'm doing things to take care of myself.
So we all need to feel significant and seen and understood. So when we do that for our kids, when we just, we all are being pulled in lots of directions, but if we sit down and just little things like have dinner without phones and really listen, those little things make a big difference.
Yeah, I mean, the family dinner, we've talked about this before. The family dinner has actually so many protective factors attached to it, because it is that time where we connect at the end of the day. And it doesn't even have to be 7 days a week, but several days a week, where we connect at the end of the day. We talk about how our day was. We listen to each other. It's not just me telling you about how my day was. It's me taking the time and energy to listen, right? The greatest gifts, the two greatest gifts that we give our children are our time and attention. Those are, it doesn't have to be material things, but we give them our time and attention. We are interested in what they're doing. And, as we do that, we model that we care about you. We love you. Wow, it seems like you've been working really hard. What can you do to give yourself a break? You are good enough. So it's saying it, but also, living it as well.
Yeah, yeah. And part of that may be that we also as parents also feel like we're never enough. We've got Pinterest and social media of like, look how great those lunches are, and that lady's like, she's a size 2 and she still works full time and her kids are all perfect. I mean, so we're in this, it's a toxic never enough culture that we're all facing, right? And that's a good check, is that it's not reality when we're seeing what we think we're seeing on social media and elsewhere.
Right. And right. The thing that would drive me crazy is whenever you watch a show and there's young children or teens, and one of the parents is up hours early making a beautiful warm breakfast, pancakes, and all these things for their kids. My kids never had that. We barely got cereal in or a granola bar on the way out the door. So you could say, well, why can't I do that, right? Well, I must not be good enough. I maybe need to get up 2 hours early to get my things done and exercise and cook a warm, beautiful meal for my children. We need to give ourselves a break. We're doing the best we can. But if we're constantly looking around, looking at like, they're doing better than I'm doing better than I am, they're better parents than I am. If we're doing that all the time and we're focusing on our inadequacies, it just actually becomes self-defeating. So we don't necessarily want to push our kids. Well, I think we want to encourage our kids to be the best that they can be. I want to encourage my kids to achieve more than I had. But there's a limit to that. And there's again, knowing your child and knowing which ones need a little boost and which ones are like, okay, that's enough AP classes, or yes, you're good enough just the way you are. You don't need straight A's. It's okay to get a B or B plus. You're just as good a person. So really sending those messages verbally as well as showing them.
And the reverse, we've all had that moment where you look at something and you're thinking, okay, you didn't do so well in that test, or you didn't do well in that class. And you might be thinking as a parent, it's because you didn't do your homework, or you didn't do the things you should be doing. And then we go into the tailspin of like, oh gosh, maybe I'm doing something wrong. I think that's what's different about this generation. I don't know that my mom looked at my grades until the report card came. Now we're all like in it, right? We're all like, oh, we got to be invested. And why is so? So what would be the right way to model you're good enough, but at the same time, like, hey, you could have done better.
So it's actually, it's a dialogue, right? It's, wow, you mean it looks like you really bombed that test. What could you have done differently? It's not me telling you, you need to study more and you need to do this and you need to do that, because what happens with a teen is, zoop, they shut right down. They don't listen to a word that you're saying. It's engaging it and saying, listen, did it make you feel good? Like, are you okay with that? Because if you're okay with getting a D, not a lot that I'm going to say is going to change that, unless you really believe they're just being self-defeating or something else is going on. But like, were you okay with that grade? What do you think you could have done differently? Because I'll give you my opinion. My opinion is maybe you could have done more of the homework, but again, I do worry a little bit about that level of micromanagement. Now, some kids need more management, some kids need less management. I get that. But yeah, no one, just a generation ago, no one had any idea what our grades were until you either got a progress report that you were failing something. Barring that, it was when the report cards came out.
Yeah.
So we do have so much information, but I do worry sometimes it's information overload. But engaging them, finding out what their motivation is. If your child has zero motivation to do well in school, that's concerning to me. But we need to find what they're motivated for. Maybe they're not meant to be on a college track. Maybe they need to be more in a vocational track. We need the vocations too. We need plumbers and electricians and HVAC and we need all those folks too. Mechanics, right. We need all those folks. They're equally as important, and actually it's considered a different form of intelligence than sometimes just academic intelligence. Someone who can take something apart and put it back together has, superior mechanical intelligence that certainly I don't have and a lot of people don't have. So it's looking at what's best for your child, what helps them learn best, what motivates them, and then trying to help them and support them in that direction.
So let's talk about the elephant in the room, right? There's parents who've gone to college and they're doing well. Maybe this is happening in those communities where there's a lot of people who are lawyers or doctors or this or that. Psychologists, okay? They're having jobs where they're like, okay, I want my kid I want my kid to be successful. I want them to make money. I want them to have a good life. And this idea that if they don't do this, then it's never going to amount to, all this stuff. So what you're saying is, actually, it's not true. We need to kind of check that and say there are plenty of people who've been super successful who, work with their hands in restaurants, like Bobby Flay, who decided he wasn't going to college, and now he owns, 35 different restaurants, and he's famous on TV. So there's all different kinds of intelligence, and we don't need to be worried that if they're not achieving in these traditional academic ways, that their life just isn't going to be good.
Yeah, it's really holding on to the fact and believing that there are multiple pathways, right? There isn't just one path to success. There are multiple pathways to being successful, and it's how we define success. Is success finding a good, early on, finding a good match in terms of what fits for college or other kinds of professional schools? It's finding those people that you gel with, that you have as friends, and making some long-term friends and long-term connections. It's understanding that there's multiple pathways. It's not who makes the most money, but who finds the most fulfillment in what they do. So there's many pathways, and the more you can embrace that and not believe that there's just one pathway to success, it opens up the doors and allows your kids to say, okay, well, maybe I'm a little different than my siblings. Maybe I don't want to go to college. Maybe I just want to be a car mechanic. Who doesn't need a great car mechanic? We all do, right? So it's not just having one definition of what success is.
Right, the multiple pathways and the multiple kinds of intelligence. Again, the book is called Never Enough, but it's something that that's making its rounds right now. But it's something that you, in the world of psychology, your folks, your peers, clinicians have studied this. That just to circle back here, this toxic achievement culture, it may look shiny that these kids are getting great grades and they're getting all these accolades and awards at school, but the toll is that they're suffering. Just like the kids who might have grown up in traumatic environments. They're having clinical levels of anxiety, depression, and substance abuse.
Right, they are suffering. And so it's just kind of checking ourselves, making sure that we're not kind of overly pushing our kids in this toxic achievement culture. Yes, allowing them to step into higher level expectations or wanting to achieve more, but also being careful about where is that achievement coming from them, or am I really pushing that achievement? Because I want achievement. I want us all to achieve. I don't care what field you're in, but achievement has as much to do with effort and motivation as it is to do with just, a A grade on a report card.
Well, that's the thing. Some kids will come and say, I'm just not smart enough. And we know, we've talked about this before, that growth mindset is really the most important thing. And doing well in school, from my understanding, there may be those couple of people who are geniuses, but doing well in school really isn't about this extraordinary intelligence. It's usually to do with work ethic, study skills. You can really learn to do well in school.
Absolutely. Right. It is, in fact, skills. And it's also, even in high school, it's making sure you're in classes that fit your learning style. We don't all need to be in high level honors and AP classes. I always like to, I told my kids, you know how many AP classes I took in high school? 0. I took 0. I'm at least a reasonably successful person. I think there's probably people that would disagree with me, but I'm reasonably successful. I took 0 AP classes. I worked hard. I was a very good student, but I also understood that there were other things that I wanted to do. I wanted to have friends. I wanted to socialize. I wanted to do those kinds of things. And I was able to balance several different things. So it's really looking at how we define success and how we help motivate our kids and help them put forth maximum effort.
Right. Okay. So, and yeah, I'll share with everyone, since they might be wondering, you went to Rutgers. You now run a department at the Institute of Living, which is considered a pretty premier place for mental health. So ultimately, you went into something, I would definitely consider you successful, Dr. Saunders, and you went into something that you loved. And I think that was what I did as well. I went into something that I loved. So that's the other thing, is really trying to, in our minute left, gear our kids to something where they love it, so then they're not going to feel like they're killing themselves.
Right. Actually, I went to the University of Scranton in Scranton, Pennsylvania.
Oh, I thought your daughter went to Rutgers.
But I am a Jersey girl, right? Yeah. I am a Jersey girl. But yeah, it was, I honestly, but no need to get into my story. I wanted to go to a different, more prestigious college. I didn't get in. And I went to a college, actually, that was a beautiful fit for me.
Perfect.
And it allowed me to really prosper and succeed in that setting, and then go on to graduate school at the University of Hartford, which is what has landed me here in Connecticut. And I was fortunate to find settings that were good fits for me.
Yep.
But I've always been someone who wants balance in my life.
Balance, we will leave it there because we're out of time, but absolutely, we want to achieve balance. And for more information on the cutting edge of wellness, you can follow me at Kara Sundlin. Have a great day and be well.
Thank you, Kara.
Thank you.